Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of the Solicitor podcast. Today I'm joined by my host Linus and our guest Lloyd Pike, who coincidentally I also work with at Hugh James. but Lloyd, I'll give it over to you just to sort of say a few words about what you do at Hugh James, and thank you again for coming on.
No problem, mate. No, it's great to be invited on by Alex. As I mentioned before we started recording, I thought that he was pulling my leg a couple of weeks ago. But it's great to join with both of you today. So as Alex mentioned, my name's Lloyd. I work in Hugh James Solicitors, which is Wales' #1 law firm. Thought I'd get that in early. But we're working with Alex when he's out on his placement year. So just thought we'd come on and have a bit of a chat about various confidence in the workplace and see where we go from there.
Yeah, it's been great. And Lloyd, you work in the NFCI department, don't you? So that stands for, I'll let you remind me and everyone listening.
It stands for non-freezing cold injury. So what we do is we deal with ex-military servicemen and women who have injuries in service. So across the department, we do kind of military deafness, which Alex has particular interest in. We do the NFCI, which is non-freezing cold injury, and some PTSD and any other kind of service injuries, really, which we can try and get help out in any sort of way. But NFCI, in a nutshell, non-freezing cold injury, is where a client or an ex-serviceman or woman have come in with exposure to extreme cold, and from that then they developed injuries, most likely to your trench foot, which people have probably heard of from GCSE history, World War One, where people were stuck in trenches a long period of time with cold exposure, and they had kind of those symptoms of the feet, including kind of coldness and the pins and needles sort of feeling, which actually has kind of led to this has really changed the lives of some of the servicemen and women that we have, and it's all about trying to gain compensation which they deserve.
Yeah, and that's quite a sort of sensitive. Go for it, Linus.
Right. What part of your job do you feel requires the most confidence, and what part of your job do you feel that you could be more confident in?
Confidence is a difficult one, really. For me, confidence in work is kind of your telephone calls with clients, especially where they've been through a kind of been a bit distress and stressful situation, kind of leaving the army or any of the armed services, really, and coming out and having not really sure what they want to do with themselves, or their injuries may be inhibiting them in terms of potential prospects of employment. It's kind of picking up the phone and having a chat with these people and kind of listening to them, their thoughts, and kind of digesting it basically, and trying to come back to a reasonable solution or help in some sort of way, in some sort of advice. But I think confidence, in a nutshell, I come from a bit of a sporting background, so I try and use some of the skills I developed kind of through that sporting background, through rugby, and the confidence in our environment are passed on to the workplace. I think it's all about kind of throwing yourself into a situation, particularly where you may not be as confident as you'd like to be, but whilst in that scenario, then kind of thriving, essentially. And that's what I find in work as well. I wasn't particularly confident having gone into the department. Didn't know much about the armed services, didn't have no family in the armed services or friends, really. So that was one way which I felt, I lacked a bit of confidence. But I think as time goes on and as you develop in the situations where you don't have confidence at the start, and you realise actually, you have got a hang of this. And I think it's just kind of that repeat practice then, which kind of gains confidence for you. So I think that's, everyone can gain a confidence in the workplace, and it grows every day. But I think what you got to look at is from day by day, you're kind of improving those little 1%ers, which is what I like into the sport, really. When we come back to rugby, my team environment, we always say about kind of improving day by day, that little 1%, because, it's all kind of like that runs to a ladder. So if you're going to go up one little step every day, when you actually turn around and look back, you realise how much you've grown. And that's kind of the main thing which I've had from kind of starting work in the department and kind of where I am now.
I think with the rugby, it's interesting you mentioned that. When I was never the best rugby player, and my sporting career as far as rugby go, it went. I had to develop very slowly, and I ended up being okay at the end. But one thing I was always really, really I was never scared of tackling anyone else, but I was always scared of being tackled because I was a little scrum half. You know, I always didn't want to get tackled. And the way that I learned was when you've got the ball, you know, once you get tackled by the wham inside centre, you know, the massive guy on the field, you suddenly get this burst of energy when you get back up because you know it can't get any worse than that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's by transferring that then to kind of any environment you're in. People used to tell me that when I was younger, I used to think that it was a bit of, you know, a bit of tosh that someone just said, make you feel a bit better. I think when you actually throw yourself into a scenario where you don't feel particularly confident and you realise actually, you know, that wasn't as bad as you expect. I think sometimes you build up a scenario in your head where you think like the absolute worst outcome, and usually it's a little bit better than that. And I think as long as you survive that bit, which 99 to 100% people would, in my opinion, it's just every day then is going to get a little bit easier. And also, back, I was speaking to a colleague in work today, we were talking about kind of work we did back in when we first joined the team almost a year ago now, and we're thinking, gosh, you know, that was awful, but I felt this way. I felt particularly like nervous or was a bit unsure what's going on. But no, having to develop that 1% every day, it almost becomes second nature. And I think that's confidence within the role then.
Have you always had that trait of just give it a go, just sort of try and expand the comfort zone, or is this something that you've adopted recently or just through rugby? What would you say?
I think probably as a child, no. It was something which has probably been developed through sport. I think I don't want to focus too much on sport, but it's what has given me kind of the most confidence for them transfers across. But for other people, that could be anything. So that could be, you know, a social environment, it could be a part-time job, it could be university degree, anything. But what I found was being in that team environment was a safe environment for me to kind of develop confidence. And when I realised there that, you know, that's knack of just throwing yourself into something and realising it's actually not too bad and then developing your confidence from them, I really quickly realised that that's transferable to lots of aspects of life. And that goes for, you know, in your working life or in university or college or any education or kind of outside of work as well. You know, meeting new people. I think if you throw yourself in and you kind of fake it until you make it at the start. I know that's a term that's thrown around quite loosely, but I do think it kind of works. I think if you build up, you actually feel you have to be more confident than you are. Within obviously measures, I don't want to be kind of overly confident. There's a fine line of that. However, I think that quickly builds your confidence then when you sort of realise internally that, you know, things actually aren't as bad as you probably preempted them to be.
I think some people, they tend to really blow out of proportion, not how difficult a situation would be, but how difficult the consequences of failure will be. When quite often, if you just give something a go, even if you do fail, you're going to be better off than when you started.
Yeah, exactly. What I think is, as well, from my personal experience, when things have gone wrong, whether that's in a sport aspect or in work, like you say, having a sit down with someone who's maybe a little bit superior, so, you know, like a captain in a sport or your supervisor in work or your mentor in university, when you sit down and actually go through it, you go, oh, you know, I see where I've gone wrong there, and you can kind of start putting that right yourself. And I think that's probably the best practice in terms of learning. The more you'll find is you actually prepare yourself a bit forward, kind of whatever field you're in that aspect. So I certainly think you probably learn the most from failure. You know, if you think of sporting teams which have gone out and winning 30, 40-0 in rugby every week, for example, you're not going to learn as much as you would have had in that one tough game which has gone the full 80, 90 minutes in football or whatever it is. And that's the same in work as well. If you've got a particularly hard task and you've been given that kind of responsibility of doing it, having that initial stab of it yourself, and you know, and you get pulled up saying, oh, this was slightly wrong. Well, you realise then when you have that task again, it's a case of, well, I did this wrong last time, so now I'm going to go down this path.
I can't remember. There was a story. I'm probably going to get this wrong. It's a rugby-related story, but I'm sure Solers will be able to translate it, or you'll be able to translate it into the workplace. I think it might have been Johnny Wilkinson, but he had like a conversion kick, or it was the last kick of the game to win the game. He made the kick, but he only made it just.
Yeah.
And the day, apparently, he was back on the rugby pitch making the same kick from the same angle and the same distance over and over again. And someone asked him, why are you doing that? And he said, so next time I won't just make it.
Yeah.
I just found it interesting because I think a lot of the time people think confidence is just something you're born with. Yeah, I'm the best, I'm the greatest, but it's actually not. It also is paired with a lot of other aspects of your life, like preparation, for example.
100%. And that's the thing. People say to me quite often, come across as a confident guy, but I think confidence is a skill that can kind of be harnessed and improved and daily. I don't believe it's kind of innate and you've just were born with it. I totally disagree with that. I do feel that it's kind of, you've got a starting point that everyone has, and you've just got to build off that. And as you said about Johnny Wilkson, obviously he was a perfectionist, so that's probably the nth degree of it. But like you say, the amount of times you prepare something and you practice and practice and practice, when you're in that environment then where it's high intensity and there's a lot of pressure on there, then it's a case of you can fall back on the practice you've done previously and kind of execute the skill. So I think with that in the workplace, so you got a particularly hard task and you fail or you only just get it, the next time then when you're practicing yourself in the workplace and you're speaking to your colleagues and going over and over and over it, when that particularly hard task comes up again, you can kind of refer back to the times where things were particularly tough, or the times where you practice it then rather than work. And you can kind of apply that then to the situation, and you'll soon find that you're not just kind of just getting there, you kind of excelling in that. And I think that's kind of confidence in every aspect. I think if you in university meeting new people and you throw yourself in and you got to act, like I said before, if you act like you are confident in that scenario, kind of you're building on that.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Go for it.
No, you're next, mate. We're lining up.
There you go. To you. So I know that confidence and nerves, they are quite different, but I was just going to touch upon what you said there about actually practice. So I find that, at least I've found, especially from working at Hugh James and having not all the tasks are easy. Yeah, I can confidently say that. But I find that if I have practiced something and I know that I've done a task many a time, say I'm making an initial inquiry, the next time I make that initial inquiry, it's not that I'm confident to do it, it's almost that I'm sort of less nervous about it in a weird sort of twisted way, but less nervous because I've done all that preparation before, because I know that I put the steps in beforehand. I can just sort of let it roll out as I practiced, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. And it's like that in anything in life. I think the more you practice something, the more confident you're going to get. And then what you find is then the task that you're completing is a little bit easier, or not easier. It's kind of done to a higher standard. I think Alex was training recently for his half marathon, as he kind of took every day and work. Turn up on that Sunday and run a half marathon. You may have completed it, but you may have been, more knackered or at a slower time than he would have been. But the fact that he put in, the months of prep in terms of starting off at 1 mile and building up, then when he actually got to the end, it was completed at a quicker time, or he found it a little bit easier. So I think it's all about setting kind of those small targets when you get it, things like that. So you kind of break the actual task into small, simple steps, and then you kind of do your little 1%, as mentioned, every day in terms of practicing the first bit, then the next bit, then the next bit. When you add it all together, then you complete that task. In work or in sport or in anything in life, you'll soon find that the great task at the start in which you doubted or you'd be worried about, when you actually broke it down and put it all together again, it's probably not as bad as you first thought. And then once you realise that and you do a couple more, that's when that confidence then is kind of gained.
Yeah, 100%. And that's actually music to my ears, because Solas will tell you the amount of times I've got really frustrated with people talking about their great ambition, their great dream that they're never going to achieve. Yeah. And they say, I'm never going to achieve this, but this is what I'd like to do. It's like, well, because you're thinking on too much of a large scale. If you broke that dream down into like 50 tasks and just focused on task one, it would be a much quicker journey.
Yeah, definitely. And what I think as well, that it's certainly in workplaces, not workplaces, but kind of like areas of work, then you find that person A compares themselves to person B, C, and D about kind of their past. And I think it's more so kind of like not comparing yourself with other people, but kind of comparing yourself with who you were the day before, or the month before, the before.
100.
And it's saying like the end goal is your end goal. You want to be, I don't know, a film star. And it's like, well, how am I going to get there? Well, that seems miles off now. But it's kind of putting those little steps in place, those little 1% every day. So, for example, with my work as a trainee solicitor now, qualifying in October rather. And it's like, well, when I was in university, well, I want to be a solicitor, so you're going to get there. So this is off my own background, but it's more so you do your research day one, find places where you'd like to work day two. You then look up to apply for training contracts or vacation schemes which you apply for. Then you get the interview, then you prep in. So it's like you break it all down in little bits, and all of a sudden it's 2 years down the line and you're in a better place. And if everyone can relate to that. But that's what I've always found it. I think when I was younger, especially in the sporting, it was more so I was worrying about what he was doing over there rather than what I was doing inside. And I think sometimes people can kind of get lost by that.
Yeah.
We
you
you might actually come in on this, size, because we our last episode we interviewed another lawyer called Scott Campbell, who works at Linklaters, and he was talking a lot about the stress levels as a lawyer. And Solas has spoken to me a lot about, some hard tasks he's had to do. Maybe sometimes he wasn't confident. But I was just wondering if you as a trainee solicitor, what are your stress levels like? How do you manage them? And how are you confident that you're not going to let them affect what you're actually doing?
In terms of stress levels, I think it just depends on kind of, not so much the task at the moment, kind of the volume, so it depends on meeting kind of court orders, etc. I think in terms of managing stress as well, managing expectations of yourself and with the team, so being honest, open and honest about kind of what you can complete to a particularly high standard. I think what we found in our team is that certainly my experience anyway, sure Alex will have his own opinion on it, but the team particularly supportive, so it's very much kind of an open book. And that environment where, similar to sport, is kind of we all muck in together, not probably the most politically correct way of putting it, but we all kind of dig in together and get the task done as one. I think it's just kind of, managing stress. I quite often at the start of the day set out the task I needed to make kind of a to-do list as such, and kind of set out the urgent task, get them done first, and then anything that I need a bit of help on, I'll speak to colleagues in terms of if they have any opportunity to give me a hand, or if there's anything they can pick up on my behalf. It's all about, as I've already said, kind of mucking in together as a team in my environment or in my workplace, and make sure the task is done to a particularly high standard. But I certainly think what I've learned since kind of a year ago is that at the start, when I first came into the firm or the department, my organisation wasn't probably as good as it should have been. And then what you find is then when tasks build up and people start asking questions, rather than kind of pointing outwards and blaming others, it's kind of pointing within and being like, oh, well, I probably wasn't good enough there. So that's one thing I've particularly learned on, which has brought down stress levels. But no, stress levels, I do laugh. I do say to Alex, I pull my head out sometimes, but I think it's just me trying to cover up my aging hairline more than anything. But no, I think it's just been a bit more organised and being a bit more realistic to yourself, to your colleagues, and also to kind of clients or third parties.
Yeah. So would you say the more organised you are, the more confident you are? Would you say they go hand in hand? Yeah,
definitely. I think we already touched upon kind of the more you prepare for something. And I think having that kind of to-do list, for example, for me, kind of sets out in my head what the task has to be done. So I'm a bit more prepared to start the day. So I think it kind of comes into that aspect of being prepared for a task, or the preparation before completing the task or skill, which you mentioned previously. So being organised is kind of fundamental to my role. If I wasn't organised, then tasks just wouldn't be done. And then my position in my team will be scrutinised because I've not picked up things and other people have to pick it up. But I also found the sporting background have that in the terms of when I play rugby or any sort of sport that people who are listening play, it's more so you don't want to let people down. As I was kind of organised myself to make sure that the team aren't any worse off or negatively affected.
Yeah. What do you think? I'd say team sports are a weird one for me. I like playing team sports, but I hate playing team sports competitively.
Yeah.
Because I despise the fact that other people are relying on me to perform. And
Yeah.
I despise the fact that I'm relying on other people to perform. I like to be able to see if I win and know why I win, and see if I lose and know exactly why I lost, because it's me, because I did this wrong, that wrong. How's that big? Obviously, rugby is not just a team sport, but if there's one gap in the line, you could lose a try. If anyone's not doing their job exactly to the team, it could be a problem. So what's that like, and how have you translated that to the workplace?
It's a difficult one to gauge, really. I think it goes down to, as long as kind of each individual person is kind of trying their absolutely best. That's all we can ask of people. I know it's kind of a bit of a cop-out answer, but that's what also I find. When in pre-game, what I'm thinking is, each individual person, you know, if they're putting 100% into everything, and that goes with things which require skill and don't require skill. And that's what I kind of focus on as well, is the second one, really, things which kind of don't require skill. So, you know, are you working hard enough, essentially? So you're working hard enough off the ball? Are you getting into line? Are you chasing everything down? Are you running as hard as you can? And that can be transferred across then to kind of the workplace and things.
What position are you?
I play back row.
Okay.
That's up for debate as well. I think I'll have to ask my coach what my actual position is, so I don't think anyone knows. Left back on the bench, I think, new position next year, but no, back rower. And that's what I try and focus on. Is that, like, you know, it's not so much the skill level in terms of things which require absolutely no talent whatsoever. Like, anyone can get up and run hard, anyone can do this, anyone can do that. And I think when you translate that to the workplace, everyone starts off, when they first join a department in a law firm or in a team, they have kind of very limited knowledge, and everyone has been there and everyone's done it. But if you seem to be working hard, seem to be kind of asking for help, helping for others, and doing your best, then that's all you can really ask for to start. And what you'll quickly find is you pick things up that we've already touched upon. So that's one thing which I try and hold with me every day, is that sense of, you know, doing things which require absolutely no skill, and that's just being on time. You know, doing your to-do list, make sure your preparation is correct, and that goes from sport to working life to outside of work.
Well, it's like 90% of the job, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you can do those basic things, it's right. If I'm ever late to something, it's like a world-ending experience for me. I hate it so much. I went to like army school, so 5 minutes before we're on time and all that stuff. Yeah. And if I'm late to something, it's like you're not doing the basics right. And you hear all these successful people saying that most of their success is based on the fact they've got a routine, they come up on time, their tie's done up properly, and all these other simple things. And actually the complex things sort of fall into place when you get those simple things right. I'm sure Dollars was always on time, weren't you?
Yeah, always, of course. Just touching on what you said there, I think there's a lot to be said for discipline, sort of.
Yeah, 100%.
Being connected to confidence. But sorry, go for it.
No, that's it. That hits the nail on the head. I think coming out of the pandemic, beforehand I was pretty good in my routine. I was getting up, going to university. You know, I had training after university. I knew I had to do X, Y, and Z. But coming out of the pandemic, I probably was stuck in that kind of lethargic mindset where I was not doing very much in the days, just sleeping in, and all of a sudden these kind of affect kind of physical and mental health then. But I think for me, knowing I've got a routine, I need to get up at a certain time, I need to go to the gym to improve kind of physical and mental health, and make sure I'm on to work on time when I put my 110% in. Like you said, a lot can be said from that. Is kind of the mark of the man, as people say, and it's just kind of bare minimums. And if people seem to be doing those bare minimums to kind of their 100% capacity, the more complex stuff will fall into place. And I feel like you find that kind of across the board. So if you are kind of polite, you're attentive, you turn up in time, you pay attention, you ask appropriate questions, those basic things are going to take you a long way. And that's my experience from a workplace. You know, you're coming in, and as I said, you have kind of bare minimum knowledge and things. But as long as you seem to be doing, people are going to warm to you, and they're going to give you their 100% because they see that you're giving your 100%. And then each day, then, when you're literally proving that, it will 1%, 1%, 1% every day. It's like we say, all of a sudden, it's 12 months down the line, and you're totally much more confident in knowing what your role is in the team, or in the department, or any workplace that you work in, and you know that you are kind of making a difference. And I think that comes down to is like you go in one day and you kind of have one task you say you want to get done, you get that done, you feel a little bit better, and that's your little 1%. I used to listen to a couple of podcasts with when I first coming out to the pandemic, really, it was all over the place. Listening to a lot of kind of Stephen Bartlett stuff and like Jordan Peterson and things like that on there. And they're saying about kind of winning the day or winning the morning. And that's what I found lots of. So I used to have kind of like a bit of a notepad next to me that I was going to do at the end of the night, write down what needs to be done the next day. And then when I wake up, it was like, right, basic things like going to the gym, do my bed, get to work on time, making sure I get those tasks done. And when I go home in the day and they're all ticked off, I know that I've kind of won that day, which may sound a bit, but it's kind of
good, doesn't it?
A bit every day.
It feels really good, doesn't it? Even those small things, just getting them done. It's like you have already approached the task of the day thinking, I've done those like 3 things, made the bed, gone for a run, brilliant. And it's just so.
And it's exactly, and I found that what that helped me is help kind of focus my mindset on what I want and what I need to do. And from that then, it kind of improves kind of mental health and physical health, especially coming out of the pandemic. And that's one thing which I encourage loads to do. When I first did it, I had housemates being like, what are you doing that for? But you quickly find that lots of people do it in their own way anyway, whether that's in their head, they need to do X, Y, and Z, setting up the next day, or they write it down. For me, I found that if I write things down the day before, I can go to bed knowing, right, I need to get this done, this done, this done. When I come home the next day, then I'm writing down ready for the next day. I know that I've accomplished something. And there's that feeling of accomplishment, a bit of self-worth and moving forward with yourself. And I think even that then will build confidence. That's what I found personally for me anyway, is when I've set out tasks and in the morning I've gone, I don't want to do this today. But you've gone into work, you've done it well, the task is completed and you move on. You can go home and even going, I've accomplished something today. And it's building a little bit more confidence up within yourself. And more you find, more you have that kind of feeling of self-worth or feeling of self-confidence, it kind of radiates out amongst people. That's what I find within a team environment. So although me and Alex are in a department of about 45, there's about 8 of us in our team. But when there's one person who's a bit more confident, or, this is going to be fine, we're going to get this done because we're going to do X, Y, and Z, it radiates and it builds that environment then of confidence. And that's what I've always found. That's what confidence is to me, basically.
Yeah, it is contagious. I had one last question for you, and then I'll pass on to Alex to ask the final question himself and maybe wrap it up. It's just, I think that confidence and lack of it really links in a lot with your fears. Yeah. So I want to ask, what is your biggest fear, or what was your biggest fear?
I think growing up, it was probably fear of failure. I know people hear that a lot, but as a child, I always did quite well academically. I always did quite well in sport, and I thrived in those scenarios. But I think it was the first time where you fail an exam or you fail in a job interview. It was that fear of failure or that fear of rejection. But I think, as you mentioned previously, it's like when you get a task wrong and you sit down, you have that time then to sit there and kind of reassess the situation and be, well, what did I do wrong there? And it's that time where you're reflecting and reevaluating. It's actually what I've probably learned the most about myself and how the best that I kind of take on each day. So that's, everyone's got that fear of failure, everyone's got that fear of rejection, and it's totally natural to have those. But I think it's kind of the way then that once the fear and rejection does happen, because it's going to happen to everyone in every walk of life, it's kind of how you bounce back from that. I think, you don't kind of want to wait to live the life that you want, sort of thing. You don't want to be kind of sitting around waiting for something to happen because no one's going to do it for you. I think that's what I found as well. When I grew up as kind of an only child, everything, spoon in my mouth throughout my childhood, probably well into my teens as well. But you realise when you actually turn 18, you're going out there and you're applying for jobs, come out to university at the age of 21, you've graduated, you're not sure what you're going to do. And you're sitting around a bit like, I don't know what I'm going to do today. I'm not going to sure what I'm going to do for my life. And that fear of rejection is going to hold you back. Then you just got to think, that no one's going to do it for you. You need to get out there. And if you have, fear of rejection, you've got to face it kind of up close and personal. It'll be like, if I do fail in this, then we sit back and we reassess and you go again. Because every single time you have that failure or that rejection, it's going to improve you that little 1%, 2%, 3%, and all of a sudden you get to your end goal. Everyone gets to this eventually. Come back to the bit about kind of comparing yourself to others. I'm doing my training contract at 23, 24, and some people who are doing it at 30, 31, 32. It doesn't matter at all. for me, I feel like I should have done it years later. For them, I feel like I should have done it years before. But I even tell myself now, it's not to compare myself to one person or the other. It's kind of your own personal journey, and everyone will, in the end, as long as you have that confidence to survive, you and thrive in those scenarios. There'll be more, the innate motivation to improve and to kind of get to that end goal. Then everyone will get there in the end, and that's what I've come back to, really.
100%. No, I think that's something that all those that listening really need to consider, because people waste so much of their talent worrying about rejection. It's really
and that's what I find lots of the time is I should sit down and worry about things, and when you sit down on your own after work, you're thinking, oh, I should have done this, should have done that. You're building up something in your head which probably is a lot worse than it really is. Because I'll often speak to my boss and he'd be like, oh, I'm really worried with this, and she's like, well, why are you worrying about that? Because this is going to be done, this will be done. And once those things are done, the task is done and the job's completed, we can move on from it. So I think sometimes, knowing when to offload to others and speak about your fears and your worries. And it's often that kind of problem shares, a problem half, my mother used to say. And it's the same thing. So, but speaking about your worries, journaling things, writing them down, which then adds to your preparation, which means you can complete the task better, which then improves your confidence. And I think those things are interlinked. And the more you do kind of task preparation complete is when your confidence then starts building in the workplace or kind of whatever you're doing.
100%. Solid.
Completely agree. Well, Lloyd, I know you've got to bounce off soon to get your rugby training, so I won't keep you for too long. I was just going to say I completely agree with what you were saying about how negative comparing yourself to someone else's.
Yeah.
I think the only person you should really be comparing yourself to is who you were yesterday, a week ago, a month ago, and how you're progressing on your own. That's what I say. But like I said, won't keep you on for too much longer. So I think that's a good place to end. But thank you very much for coming on. Thank you everyone to listening, and thank you very much to Linus. And
thank you, boys. I really appreciate that, and it's again as I'm
love that deep bass, love that sound. Top floor with me, whipped and bound. Models that's heaven finally found. Bass reverberating through the ground. Drink in my hand, I'm a raver. Got the gold, the racks, and the paper. DJ calling, Mr. Savior. Girls on the pool, but I do that later. Drink in my hand, I'm a raver.